Hi, and welcome to this re-recording of the Tableau public training run on the 20th of June, How to Find and Prep Your Data, IronViz Special. I'm re-recording this webinar because when I went to upload the video of the original one, the audio quality was really poor, so hopefully this one is a little better. My name's Sophie Sparks. I'm part of the Tableau public team based in London, and I hope you're having a good day. Today we're going to be looking and finding 3 different data sets, and then we're going to have a look at some pretty typical ways you need to clean data sets. Now this is an IronViz special training, so we're going to be looking for data sets that you could use in the current IronViz contest, the theme of which is IronViz on Safari, so focusing on data sets around plants and animals. So to get started, we're going to have a look at how to find a data set. To do this, I'm going to pull up a few different web pages. And on the left-hand side, you'll see a web page which has how to Google. Now, I know this might sound pretty basic, but how I usually find data sets is I remember something I heard about that I thought was interesting. For instance, a while ago, I read a news article on the Australian website for the Sydney Morning Herald, and it was about the trade in biodiversity, so species, plants, and animals around the world. And I thought this was a pretty interesting data set, but I can't really remember much more than that was what it was about. And I have the impression that it was compiled by a UN agency, so part of the UN somewhere. So if you're looking for a data set, then using your browser's advanced search features are a really good way to begin to hone in and find what the data actually is. So on the left-hand side, there's is how to Google. There are many different resources on how to use advanced search features in Google or in indeed any other search engine. I like this one because it's quite visual and I find it really easy to remember. So we're going to have a look at using a few of these advanced search features to try and find the web page or this data set that I remember seeing or linked to this article I read a little while ago. So we'll go ahead and do this on the web page on the right hand side. Now the first bit of information I remember was it was probably a UN site, so I'm going to limit and only look for sites that are UN. Now this means it will limit my search results to only UN websites. This is pretty helpful. I often, if I know I'm looking for a data set, let's say about something that could be global, but I only want to find what's happening in the UK, let's say fox population, I could limit and say site.co.uk or .uk, or limit the country field to just those from the UK. It really helps refine your results. So we'll start with siteun.org, and then so something about biodiversity. And I'll put the word statistics. Forgetting how to spell here a little bit, because I'm looking for some sort of statistics. Now I could refine that a lot more, and I could use a wildcard. We can see over here in the green, the tilde. I could maybe put in the word database with a tilde in front of it to say, show me something like database, data set. But we'll start with un.org and biodiversity and the words biodiversity and statistics. And Tableau, that means we'll look for the word biodiversity and the word statistics separately or together on any un.org website. And let's see what we pull back. So my search results, I've got some PDFs coming up at the start, and it looks like I'm probably beginning to get to the right area. I have lists about sustainability, so forests, overfishing, and goal 15 from the UN's sustainability goals. So this is looking pretty good. But I see in the top, I've got a site all about statistics on biodiversity from the UN. Brilliant. So I might open that up because this would be a really good place to limit my search results to. So I'm going to grab the start of this URL and I'm going to limit my search now to not just UN.org sites, but UN Stats and the UN Stats Environment section. So I'll go ahead and refine that search result and say site only look at un.org, and I'll hit enter. And now I see this is looking good. I've got lots more statistics on biodiversity, environmental snapshots for countries, but these are mostly PDFs. And I know I'm looking for a website which will have possibly a database on it, or maybe it's an Excel sheet. So I need to not look for PDFs. So I'm going to add another search function here, and I'm going to call file type. So I'm going to say PDF. And at the moment, this would show me only PDFs. If I put a little negative sign in front of it, I'll move my mouse away so you can see that. That means not for Google Advanced Search. So now I'm looking for the words biodiversity and statistics on the un.org stats site and the environment subsection of that website. And I'm looking for everything but PDF documents. So I'll hit search and see what we get. So this is looking much more promising. So I can see I've got a statistic division manual and the basic set of environmental statistics. And my second hit, Global Biodiversity Information Faculty Data Portal. Now this is sounding good. So now I'm thinking I probably should have used the word data portal instead of statistics in my original search. I'll remember that for next time. So let's open this up and see if this data portal points me to the website or the data set I'm thinking of. So we'll go and have a look, and immediately I see that this might be a good place might be able to find what I'm looking for, and if not, I'll definitely be able to find some other interesting web pages and possible data sets. So if I go down to the biodiversity section, I've got the UN Red List, and I've got sort of a few other databases on a protected area, the UN environment data, and Secretariat on Species and Database, CITES. Now this is sounding familiar. I think this is what I'm looking for, so I'll go ahead and open it up. And I'll just make this page bigger. So this is looking pretty good. So I've got species lists, I've got documents, and my related resources tab, I see I've got a trade database here. Now this sounds probably what the data I was originally thinking about came from. So let's go and have a look at this. And CITES stands for the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. Now, this looks really promising. So now I need to think of the easiest way I find to analyze data is to analyze things that I'm actually interested in. So now I've found a really interesting data set. Let's limit it and only look at the UK. I'm currently living here, so I'd be really interested to know what endangered plants and animals are getting imported into the UK. And I'll look from 2015 to 2016. And I'll limit this and say I only want to look at the United Kingdom. And search. Brilliant. Now I can download this as a CSV and I can grab the report. And I also have a guide to the trade database. Now, it's always helpful to look at any supporting documentation to any data you have. It usually contains really useful information about how the data was collected, what data has been included or excluded, which is very helpful to know. Lists of how the data has been aggregated or references, so they might have definitions on what the different data contained in the data set or database is. So we should go and have a look at that as well. I actually have that already opened up here, and it has some really useful information. And if I grab the data set I downloaded just before, and I'll drag it onto the screen, we can see why I've pre-opened this to the Annex 2 page. So let's go ahead and look at this data set. And I can see that it has information the year. I've got the classification of the plants and animals down to the genus level. I can see they've been imported into the UK, which is what our filter was, so that's good to know. I can see where they were exported from, and if the origin country is different from the exporting country, I can see that as well. I've got some really interesting information about the number that were reported arriving, the quantity, compared to the reported quantity that left the exporter. So I can see this was live, so some maybe died on transit, which is interesting. I can see if they're live, if it's a specimen, seeds, shells, carvings, and I've got these two columns here on the furthest right, purpose and source, that are coded. So now this is where that supporting documentation comes in handy. I'll just open it back up again so we can have a look. So I can see I've got the purpose. I've got that code here in the supporting documentation. So B is for breeding in captive or artificial programs. Z is they've been imported for a zoo. P for personal. So this is pretty useful information. And a common situation you may find when you have a data set is you want to join additional or supporting information onto that data set to enhance it. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's say I want to join this purpose onto with the full description of the purpose onto my original data set. So to do that, I can copy it from this PDF. I'll open up my data set and I'll go ahead and paste it in here. And a tip, if you're copying anything out of a PDF, is usually best to paste it as plain text, which means you don't get any of the PDF formatting coming through. And you can have a look at this. So it's pasted it as one column with the code, the letter that matches in my data set, and then a space, and then the description. So it's pasted as one column of data. So we'll have to see how we can maybe modify this to mean we can join it onto our data set. So let's go ahead and open up our data set in Tableau and have a look at it. Just drag it onto the screen. So here's our CITES data that we just had in that Excel spreadsheet. We can see it looks exactly the same as it did in Excel. And if I scroll over to the right, we can see the purpose and the source fields. So I want to join the data I just grabbed out of that PDF to the purpose field. Now let's go ahead and have a look at what that looks like. So here's the data we just grabbed out of that PDF. And we can see it's all in one column, and we've got this letter and then a space. And we're going to need to get that letter by itself if we want to successfully join the data together. And that's because when you're joining data to each other, you need to have one field and column. So one field that's exactly the same between the two data sets. And so in this case, I'd need to somehow extract this first letter of the data of the purpose, so that we would have that to be able to match to the data in our CITES 2015-2016 data set. So instead of going back into Excel and doing this by hand, copy pasting, I can actually do it here in Tableau using a calculated field. Now in Tableau you can join data sets together using a calculated field if you don't have one field in common already. So let's go ahead and see how we can do this. So we'll grab our CITES data and we'll just have a look to see what would happen if we try and join them together without with the data as it is now. And I'll grab that raw data and join it on. I'll see what Tableau is joining it by clicking this little join icon. So it's saying the purpose from our CITES database is joining with the purpose from our that purpose details we grabbed out of the PDF. And we can see we have no data. So obviously that join has not been successful, which is what we expected, because actually the purpose in our purpose details sheet, the one we grabbed from the PDF, is not formatted the same as it is in the CITES database. So we're somehow going to have to remove that first letter so we can join the two, remove that first letter and use just that first letter to join the two data sets together. Now we can do this using a calculated field. Now this isn't quite as scary as it sounds. So I can click on the little arrow next to the field I'm going to need to change. Now I get the option to create a join calculation. Now what I need to do is I need to get that first letter out. So I'll have a column with that first letter that I can use to join the two data sets together. Now this is a text column, so I'm going to have a look at my string functions. And if I go down, I've got this function called left. You can click on any function in Tableau and you'll get a description of what it is, an example of how to use it. So this says, this returns a specified number of characters from the start of a given string. And the example is if we have the word calculation and we say left the word calculation 4, we're going to get the first 4 letters of the word calculation. Now we've got our field purpose and we want to get the first letter of that field purpose. So I'm going to use left. So I'll go ahead up and begin to type left in, brackets, and if we click on the function we can see it again, so we need to use brackets, then the field, comma, and then the number of characters we want to get out. So I'm going to go comma 1, close my brackets. Tableau says the calculation is valid. That's good. Hit OK. And now we can see our data has joined. It's been successful. And I can go ahead and check this by looking and seeing that purpose, Z, matches with the description of purpose, which is zoo. Now, what we're seeing here is that original purpose field. So the field we created to join is actually is not being displayed to us. So if I wanted to grab this field now, I could split it off and just get the second half and just say, just show me the word zoo. But for the meantime, we'll stop it here and move on to our next data set. So what we've seen here is how to use the advanced search features in your browser, in your search engine, to really begin to drill in and hone down a data set. So really useful ones are limiting the site or the country where you're looking, using the file type to say only show me files of particular type or don't show me files of particular type. Understanding how search engines, when you put the search terms in, how you can say not this term, and how you can also combine terms together and say only search for specific words, or you can search for specific phrases. Now we've had a look at then how to join additional data on to your original data set and how to use that using a calculated field. If you're not familiar with joins and you'd like to learn more about these different types of joins, an inner join and a left join, for instance, check out our videos on the Tableau public website about joining data together. We've got a really good example of what an inner join and what a left join is there. So the second data set we're going to be looking at is, bring it up onto screen, one about wild bird populations in the UK. Now, when I was looking for data sets for this training, why this came to mind was we've recently in the UK had an outbreak of avian influenza, and it was in the news because people with chickens or chicken farms had to keep the chickens undercover. They couldn't let them outside because of the potential for them being catching avian influenza. And this was the reason why avian influenza come into the UK was it came across with a wild population of birds, migratory birds in this case. So I thought it would be interesting to see how the populations of wild birds in the UK is changing over time, because this might help us see if the situation where wild birds may harbour a large population that could potentially become infected with disease is higher or lower. And also, wild bird populations is a really good way to monitor the health of an ecosystem. So I use similar sort of advanced search features to look for this data set. So I'd look for wild bird in inverted commas to say look for that specific word, and I limited the search to only UK sites, and then zoomed in again to look for the gov.uk websites where lots of the data is held. So if we go ahead and open this data set up, I've already downloaded it. It looks like this. So this is a pretty typical looking data set for you might download from a government website or a international organization, and it's got a lot of headers at the top, and these headers are really useful. They tell us interesting and important information. So it tells me what years are contained within the data set. It tells me how this data has been indexed. So it's saying that 1970 is 100, so it's 1, and then we're looking at the changes from that baseline index. It's got information about where the data came from, and importantly, it has information about the release. So this data was last released on the 18th of May this year. So I can go ahead and check to see if that's the most up-to-date data, which is pretty good. And then the data, in the body of the data, we have individual columns that have each of the individual groups of birds. So we've got all species, farmland birds, woodland birds, and I go across this sort of wetland birds and a few others. And if you went and read the release notes, which are sort of linked on that URL in the header, for each of these, we've got smooth data at various different levels of smoothing, and it explains why they've smoothed the data and if you should use it or not. And how Tableau is going to read this when I bring it in is going to read each of these fields, so all species, farmland birds, woodland birds, as unrelated to each other. So it's going to see them as discrete data fields, which may or may not be how you want your Tableau how you need your data to be structured to conduct the type of analysis you want to do in Tableau. So we'll have a look at this and then see if we need to pivot the data around to change how the data is structured to conduct the type of analysis we want to do. And what that analysis is I want to be able to compare farmland birds, woodland birds, and water and wetland birds. I want to compare these three groupings of birds and see how their numbers have changed over time altogether on one axis. So I want to create a line chart looking at the change in these three and have them all in the same chart to make it really easy to compare. So let's go ahead and bring this into Tableau, and then we can have a little bit, have a look and understand what the structure of this data is and then what pivoting data is all about. So I'll open this up in Tableau. And let's grab our data. And we can see those headers. This data isn't looking quite how we want it to start our analysis. We don't have the data starting here in our first cell, and we don't have the column headers at the top. That's because we have all of these header fields at the top here. Now, instead of me having to go back to my original data set, delete these useful fields, save them somewhere else, resave the data set, bring it back into Tableau, I instead can just use this thing called the data interpreter. It's really handy. It's up here in your upper right-hand corner, and it is for Excel sheets. So let's turn the data interpreter on. And what Tableau has done, I can review the results. It's tidied up my data set. It's seen that the data didn't look like it started in the top sort of cell of that original Excel file. So it's gone ahead and seen where it thinks the data has started, and it's tidied the data up for me. And you see it's done a pretty good job. And it's also got all my headers here as well. So I can see my all species, I can see my farmland birds, and for the smoothed, if I it's hasn't added the all species here because that was at a level above. It was in a separate row in Excel, so I'd have to go ahead and manually type that in if I wanted to use these smooth columns, because otherwise there are smooth data one, smooth data two. It's not very helpful, but when it's laid out like this, I can see that this obviously relates to all species, farmland birds, and sort of along the way. Now, I only wanted to look at farmland birds, woodland birds, and water birds. So I'm going to go ahead and hide all the other fields that I don't want to look at. This tidying up data makes it a lot easier to not get lost in a big data set when you're doing your analysis. And it'll also make it easier for me to show you what's going on in this webinar. So I'll highlight the fields to the farmland birds. I'm just holding Shift down on the PC, and I'm going to hide those fields. I'll do the same until I get to my woodland birds, and just hide those fields, and go ahead and I'll do the same thing until I get to wetland birds. And just to finish tidying it up, I'll hide all the other fields after the wetland birds as well, just for this. And when you hide a field, they're still there. You can unhide them and use them back in your analysis, but it just makes it a little bit tidier. So just before we jump in, I'll look at one other thing. It's really helpful to look at when you start analyzing any data set is to see how Tableau is reading in your fields. And I can see all my fields here have this little hashtag sign in the upper left-hand corner above the column header. And that means Tableau is reading these fields in as numbers. So for the year field, it's not actually seeing the year 1970, it's seeing the number 1970. I want to go ahead and tell Tableau that this is a year field, not a number field. So I'll click on this little hashtag icon and go down and change it to a date field. So Tableau's now changed this to a date, and it's given a little calendar symbol to show that it's a date field now. So let's jump in and see if I can look at the trends over time for each of these three types, groupings of birds, and see if I can do that all on one axis. So I'll jump in to my first sheet. And go ahead and let's put my year on columns, and I can drag out each of my bird types, farmland birds, woodland birds, and water and wetland birds, and I can easily build 3 line charts. So looking over time, the trends in how many of these bird groupings there are in the UK compared to 1970. And I can see immediately that there are significantly fewer farmland birds in 2015 than there were in 1970. So compared to 1970, the index is 0.48. So we have nearly just under half the number of woodland birds in the, farmland birds in the UK, wild farmland birds in the UK than we did in 1970. But each of these are on a separate axis. So at the moment, with how my data is structured, Tableau is reading each of these bird groupings as a discrete data field. And it means that since they're all in discrete columns, they're discrete data fields as far as Tableau is concerned, I can't combine them all onto the same axis. And now I want to do that because while I can see quite easily what's going on, it's harder to compare, let's say, wetland and water birds compared to farmland birds because they're not on the same axis. I'm having to my eyes are having to jump up and down this visualization quite a bit. So I'm going to take these fields off, and we're going to see what we can do if we pivot the data around. So I'll go back to my data source, and you can see you can just jump to and from your data source anytime during your analysis, which means you can start looking at your data, and then if you need to maybe clean your data set up a little bit more, you can jump back and do that. It's really helpful. So what I want to do now is I want to pivot the data around. That means I want to basically stand my data on its head. I want to stack each of these columns on top of each other. So I want one column that has my farmland birds, woodland birds, and water birds, and another column that has the index. And then the year will be, I'll be stacking these one on top of each other. So I can do that by highlighting all the fields. Again, I'm just using Shift. And this little arrow that we use to hide the fields, we're going to now instead pivot the data around. So I'll hit pivot and we'll see what Tableau does. So what it's done is it's stacked the data on top of each other. So now for 1970, I have one row for farmland birds, one row for water birds, and one row for woodland birds. Before I had, so now it's, I only had 1 year with 3 separate columns, one column for farmland birds, one for water and wetland, and one for woodland birds. And now I've pivoted my data around, so I only have one column with all my bird types in there. So I'm going to go ahead and rename this and call it bird grouping. And I'm going to call this pivoted field my index. So this is index. And this field now has the index for each year. So now we can sort of see what pivoting data does. And you often have to pivot data. A really common example when you need to pivot data is when you download a data set and they have each year as an individual column. Really common, especially for data downloaded from government websites or international organization like lots of UN data websites. And Tableau then will treat each year as an individual column, unrelated to each other, and it makes it impossible to do time series analysis. So then you have to pivot the data around to get all your years stacked into one column. So pivoting is a really useful thing to have to understand and to be able to do to your data. So let's go ahead and look now. I'll jump into sheet 1, and let's go ahead and put my index on row and grab my bird groupings, and we'll notice this is a similar sort of thing to we saw before, and drag and drop my bird groupings on there, and now I can easily map all the different bird groups onto one set of axes, and it makes it much easier to compare the subtleties of what's going on, trends year and year between all 3 different groups. So we can see that all groups have decreased over time a little. There's quite a lot of variation and fluctuation year on year, which is to be expected with wild bird species. But it makes it very obvious to see the sort of similarities in patterns for a little while at least between woodland and water birds, and how very different the pattern is for farmland birds. So that's how to pivot data around in Tableau using the pivot function. And we also had a look just then at how to change how Tableau is reading data fields. So for this example, we changed the year from being read in as a number field to being read in as a date field. And the last data set we will look at is one in Wikipedia. So we've had a look at 2 data sets about animals now. So we've looked at, well, CITES is both plants and animals, and bird populations. And this time we've got a Wikipedia page which has a list of all the oldest trees in the world. So this page has a few different tables on it. It's got individual trees with verified ages. If we scroll down, we can see it's got a table for the oldest trees with estimated ages, and it has another table at the bottom with another set of trees. And what I want to look at is the individual trees with verified ages. So I want to see what are the oldest trees in the world, and what species they are. Now we can copy paste this table out of Wikipedia and paste it into an Excel file, but we can use a really cool function in Google Sheets to grab this data directly into Google Sheets. And because you can connect Google Sheets directly to Tableau Public, we can just then connect to Tableau Public and start analyzing right away. Now, Google Sheets has a really cool function called import. So I'll start to type it in, just like you would with in Excel. And it has a few different import functions. Import XML lets you import data structured online. You can import data, so you can import data in a URL that's in a CSV or TSV format. You can import RSS feeds. Import HTML. Import HTML lets you import data in a list or a table, and this is what we want to use. And you can also import data from other Google spreadsheets. So let's use import HTML, and now it's telling us we need to put the URL in parentheses in quotation marks, and then we need to tell it that it's in a table, again in quotation marks. And lastly, we need to put the number of the table on that page. Now this is a bit of a guess sometimes. Quite often, especially in Wikipedia pages, there can be things that are in tables that don't look like they're in tables, or vice versa. So it's usually good just to put a number in. I usually start with 1 and see what table it returns. Close those brackets and hit enter. And success, this was actually the first table on the page. And so now I've got my data in here. This is really great. I've already got it and I've made the font a bit bigger to make it a bit easier to see what we're going to do. But I want to look at the common and the scientific names. So at the moment, these are combined into one field under the species field. We have the common name and then an asterisk, the scientific name, and then an asterisk to finish it off. Now, in Tableau, we can split this field really easily, and because I want to create a column that has a common name and a column that's a scientific name. And why do I want to do that? Well, oftentimes people can call the same plant different common names, but it'll only have one scientific name. And again, we can see our age here has been imported in some really wacky formats. So we can have a look at cleaning this up using 2 tricks we would have already known. We can use a split function to get rid of this little NB bit, because if we scroll down and look, we can see that our tree age is reliably the last 5 characters, except for this NB bit here, of any of these. So we see 5 characters, we've got 4 numbers and a comma. So let's go ahead and look how we can use the split function to tidy up this data set. So I've already opened this up in Tableau Public. And here we go. So first thing we want to do is split the species. We want to get the common name and the scientific name out into their own columns. So I'm going to use a little arrow in the upper right hand corner of the species column, and I'm going to custom split. Split means you're going to let Tableau decide how to split the data, but I want to use a custom split because I want to tell it to split on the asterisk. It might instead choose to split it on a space or a different marker instead. So I'm going to custom split, use the asterisk. I want to split all the columns off and hit OK. I'll just update this and let's see what's happened. So now I've got my common name split off, and I've got my scientific name, and I've got this blank column here. Now, why has it done that? So if we see what Tableau's done, it's gone, I've told it to look for everything, and when it sees an asterisk to split, so it's grabbed that first bit before the asterisk, and then it's seen the asterisk, it's split, it's grabbed the second bit, and then it's seen another asterisk, and so it's split again, but there's nothing after that second asterisk, so it's given me a blank column. So I can go ahead and delete that. And so we can see that with the exception of this European olive tree, I have all my scientific names for all my trees. And because these are the oldest trees in the world, I could probably go back and try and find a different reference that mentions this particular tree and get the actual scientific name for it. Now we just have enough time, so I'm going to show you something, how to use the two things we've learnt today, split and a calculated field, to tidy up this age here. So the first thing I look is I see that the age is in a bunch of different formats, but the actual age seems to be in these last 5 characters. So we've got 3 numbers, so 3 characters, a comma, 4th character, and the last number, a 5th character. So we're going to need to get those last 5 characters out, and it's the last 5 characters on everything bar this one field here. So we can go about this many different ways, but let's use 2 of the things we've done already, split and then creating a custom field. So I'm going to split this on an open square bracket, and I'm just going to get the first, split that, update now, and we can see we've now got rid of that open bracket. So, and now I want to get these last 5 characters off all the fields. So I'm going to go ahead and create a calculated field. And here I'm going to do, we're going to call this tree age, this field. And here we're going to do this the same way using a similar set of logic that we used in that first data set where we used the left function to get the first character off. If I go ahead and have a look at my string functions, I scroll down, I see I've got a right function, the opposite, it seems, of the left. This will get me my characters in from the end of a given string. So I want to get the last 5 characters off the end of that string to give me my age. So I'm going to go right, open brackets. This is what I want to get my characters off. I want to get the last 5 ones. Tableau says it's valid. Hit OK. And let's update this now. And here we go. So now we've got my age of all my trees. I'll go ahead and hide these fields I don't want to see at the moment to make it a bit easier. And Tableau's seeing this field as a string still because it's been a text calculation. And so even though to us this looks like a number 5,066 years, which is an impressive, very impressive age for any tree, it's reading that as a text field, and I want it to be a number field. So I want to change this from a string to a whole number. And now Tableau is reading this in as a number field. So that's how you can use the split function to clean up a data set, and also how you can begin to think around using some of those other common functions we saw. So we used a calculated field, we used the split function, we changed the data type there for a text string to a number. And you'll find when you're cleaning data, there are only a few common things you often need to do to data sets. So you often need to pivot a data set. You'll need to use the data interpreter, maybe to clean up headers and footers. I'm using the split function to split one column that contains multiple pieces of data in it and put them in their own columns. And create a calculated field to help clean up the data and change the type. I think I've probably mentioned 2 of those twice already. So we'll leave it there. So that's how we've gone ahead and found 3 different data sets and had a look at how to clean them up and real life sort of data with all its little nuances. But if you know how to use the interpreter, pivot your data around, split data, create basic calculations to help clean your data, and be able to make sure that the data type, so like if it's a number or a date or a text string, is actually what you want it to be. Um, then those are the real basics you use with really most data sets. So hopefully that's been helpful. And last thing, before we sign off, um, one little extra. If you don't know about this newsletter, it's Data is Plural by Jeremy Singer-Vine. It's a fantastic little newsletter that he puts together mostly every week on Wednesdays. I get it Wednesdays around lunchtime, my time here in the UK. And he sends out a selection of data sets every week. It's really makes my Wednesdays. It's the best sort of nerdy data present I could hope for. And you can see a list of all his previous data sets that he sent out in the link to Google Sheets. So do sign up if you want to get some data love every week. And even if not, this is a really helpful repository of different types of data sets. Lots of them are, they've got text data, they have image banks, they've got noise, sound data banks, and also lots of data that is sort of more traditionally things you might use in Tableau, like Excel files. But it's a really, really cool little place and sometimes fun to go to if you're a bit stuck and not sure what you want to analyze. You can sort of randomly pick one line in the spreadsheet and see if you can get some inspiration there. So that's all from me. I hope this has inspired you to find and clean some data and hopefully to enter our IronViz contest, our current one, the theme being on Safari, so visiting plants and animals, and the deadline for to submit your entries is Sunday, the 25th of June at 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. So that's West Coast US time, so Seattle, San Fran. So check what time that is in your time zone. And I hope to see some really great entries coming in. So thank you so much. And wherever in the world you are, I hope you have a good day.